Well, hello, Guerin and Eli Letterman breaking in, so to speak, and letting you know the latest on Oklahoma football. The Sooners, we figured, might have some time off between now and their next bit of news, with Oklahoma State going to the Big 12 championship game to play Texas this week. Then Jeff Lebby decided he needed to be a head coach at Mississippi State. Eli Letterman is our beat writer for Sellout Crowd and selloutcrowd.com. He has already filed a very nuanced, detailed story that you need to check out at selloutcrowd.com. Eli Lebby to Mississippi State. You've been sniffing around about this for a few days. I take it you're not surprised? It was just a matter of when, not if. Is that the best way to phrase this? What do you think?
Yeah, by about Saturday kickoff in Norman, it was beginning to feel like a matter of when, not if. The smoke around this and Jeff Lebby in Starkville was pretty strong. We'd heard that he had interviewed uh, with Mississippi State during the week. Options were maybe dwindling around Mississippi State. The search was narrowing on Jeff Lebby, and that stayed. Through the game, he got asked about it and mostly deflected on Friday. I
Right.
might have said Saturday's game, but that's just because it's a funky week. It
Yeah.
was Friday's game where the smoke was there, and we asked him about it afterward. He deflected, but really, as the day went on Saturday, the rumors were really heating up. And fact is, once the Sooners were officially eliminated from Big 12 title game contention, that's when it really got going. Initial reports last night that a deal wasn't finalized, but that's where it was headed. And then this afternoon, Sunday, it was about a little after 4:30ish that official word broke. We confirmed it at Sellout Crowd, and
Right.
Jeff Lebby is officially headed to Mississippi State, landing a Power 5 job 2 years after returning to Norman. And now the Sooners move forward looking for a new OC in 2024.
I want to ask about that. In fact, I want to really nail that with you before we get out of here. But just some a review of Lebby and the 2 years. I don't know if any coordinator has ever left Oklahoma in good graces, Eli. I'm not sure
Mm.
that's possible, right? And Jeff certainly had his detractors over the 2 year run. Obviously, last year didn't go well for anybody, including Lebby. This year things went better, especially with Dylan Gabriel playing so much better at quarterback, settling back in with his old pal, the coordinator. But it still didn't keep the Wolves from howling a few times, right? Maybe one too many jet sweeps, maybe one too many snaps of the ball at 25 seconds on the play clock when the game dictated you ought maybe run a little bit, a little time down, that kind of thing, rest the defense or sort of game manage a little bit better. Not to mention the mismanaged situation with Lebby and his father-in-law, Art Briles, coming down to see him after the SMU game way back in September. That feels like 5 years ago. But to me, that was Levy's clearest misstep in his 2 years at Oklahoma. But is it possible to come up with a sort of a reasonable, nuanced review of Levy's time as of the fact that he just took the job a few hours ago?
Well, for Jeff Lebby, like regardless of everything that happened, you laid it out. The good with the offense. It's an offense that got better from year one to year two. I mean, they're everywhere. If you look at the top 10 statistically, this became one of the best offenses in the country under Jeff Lebby. Where people might poke holes in that is the situational moments. They'd point to Kansas and Oklahoma State. A big reason that Jeff Lebby, didn't have a Big 12 title game to coach in is because of how this offense played in its two losses. The flip side of that is that situational stuff. I think a lot of OU fans have familiarized themselves, or their takeaway would be that the numbers were good, but the situational football wasn't always perfect. And
Right.
then I don't think you can get around, just as they won't be able to in Starkville. The I termed it in the story, the stench of Baylor and Jeff Lebby's time there. That started when he got hired, and before he could even really start the job, Joe Castiglione and Jeff Lebby both had statements out, right? For Joe Castiglione, it was about the vetting process for OU, and Jeff Lebby emphasizing what he, quote unquote, learned in the aftermath of everything at Baylor. That came back up with Art Briles earlier this year,
Yeah.
and that was a line crossed according to Joe Castiglione. Point is, for Jeff Lebby, all that aside, it's a success because he has left Norman and in 2 years, landed that first Power 5 head coaching job. For the Sooners, I think largely positive. The fact is, 6-7 to 10-2, a lot of that has been the offense. We could say those two losses certainly had some missteps from his own offense in it. They were a big reason why the Sooners picked up those two late fall losses. But on the whole, I think a success for Jeff Lebby and a pretty solid success for Oklahoma. And now we look ahead and say, Jackson Arnold's supposed to be under center next fall. The Sooners are going to the SEC. Who is going to be calling plays? Perhaps the most defining hire of Brent Venables' tenure since arriving and since getting in with his initial coaching staff.
It is the most impactful move that Venables is going to make since he dismissed Cale Gundy. Let's just say that.
How about that? Yeah.
Full stop. Right. I mean, this is, and because this is a coordinator, as much as Cale has meant to OU football and as long tenured as he was, this is a play caller. This is the guy. Since we all know Venables is a de facto defensive coordinator at OU, offensive coordinator is a massive hire and a massive decision facing Venables. Okay, so you've listed names in your story. Let's go over them. What do you got for us?
Well, if you want to go with where a lot of eyes have turned, if all the eyes were on Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State, the rest of them turned to Seth Littrell, former North Texas coach, been on OU staff as an analyst for this season. That is where a lot of folks, in and around feel that they're going to go. They're going to keep this internal. There's continuity there. He's got play calling experience. I think at North Texas, those were his offenses. And then as a chief play caller at Arizona, at Indiana, at North Carolina. So he's done the job. He's been with this program and, kind of comes from the Mike Leach school, obviously played under him in Norman. That's, I think, where if we're talking internal options, that's where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Matt Wells, former Texas Tech coach, been on staff as an analyst for 2 seasons, plenty of play calling experience there. And, it's worth looking at Evan Jones, too, wide receivers coach for this season, arrived in the offseason, designated as the Sooners passing game coordinator. He has play calling experience. So if you want to look internal, I think it starts with Seth Littrell, but there's options there for Brent Venables. If we open it up to the outside, I think, not every one of these names has ties to Brent Venables or to OU, but a job like Oklahoma heading into the SEC, they should at least be able to consider or target whoever they'd like. It's one of the biggest openings in the country. And so you jump to some of the names, whether it's Andy Ludwig at Utah, Sean Lewis at Colorado. People really like Andy Kotelnicki at Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just that's more speculation than some of those internal options. But again, this is a job that should command a lot of interest. It'll also be a pressure-packed job as the Sooners do get into the SEC, as Jackson Arnold does take over, as we expect at least in 2024.
It's incredible, isn't it? Jackson Arnold has not started a game, right, at OU? Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Feels like he has, but a lot of talk about this kid, but he hasn't. And we don't know for sure about Gabriel's situation for next year. And if Gabriel comes back, it's not like they're going to demote him, and I don't think, and make Jackson Arnold the starter. And yet, if I'm Brent Venables and I'm about to make the most important hire of my career as a head coach, don't you think the first conversation you have is with, if not both quarterbacks, with Arnold, the one is returning and is essentially responsible for the future of your offense? You sit down with this kid and say, how do you feel around Seth Littrell or Matt Wells or Emmett Jones? How's the mesh work? How have you gotten to know these guys? We're talking about, what is he, 20 years old, 20 maybe?
19 still.
He's still a teenager, Eli. And yet you get the sense, because this is how college football works now with the threat of the portal or what else is out there, that Venables would be nuts if he didn't get a gauge of where this 19-year-old kid feel or how he feels about these potential candidates, right?
Well, you're absolutely right, because for one, a big reason Jackson Arnold landed in Norman was Jeff Lebby.
Yeah.
I sat with Jackson last year. It was a little later. It was December, so nearly a full year ago at Denton Guyer High School. And he talked about Jeff Lebby being one of the first coaches to come out and see him when he was at Ole Miss, and Ole Miss being in the running until Jeff Lebby came to Oklahoma. He was a big part of this, and they were, they enjoyed working together this fall. That relationship was central to getting Jackson Arnold to Oklahoma. Credit to the OU Daily, the campus paper in Norman. They reached out to Jackson Arnold's father last night. He responded saying, Jackson's an OU player. He's planning to be here. But you're exactly right. That's about the past. The future is, who is Jackson Arnold going to be, working with, and who is he going to be comfortable working with? Because that is, as Jeff Lebby himself said of Jackson Arnold, that's the future face of Oklahoma football. This is a decision, in an era where player movement, is easy. and made easier by the transfer portal and NIL and all that. That's got to be a factor. It shouldn't be the only factor. You mentioned he's a teenager. He shouldn't be um, steering the ship, and he certainly isn't. But you've really got to consider Jackson Arnold in this equation because he's the key, especially. Let's say Oklahoma's got a transitional period. It would help in the SEC is a quarterback who lives up to the promise of
Yeah,
Jackson Arnold and what we've seen so far, keeping him happy, keeping him in a functioning offense. That's critical.
yeah,
As much as we're going to focus on the defense with Brent Venables always, and that is where finding a comfortable fit for Jackson Arnold, whether that's someone already in the building or somebody from the outside, that's got to be paramount here.
yeah. I suppose, Eli, there's a world where Venables does sit across the coffee table from Jackson Arnold, and the youngster says, "I love you, man. I love OU. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm married to Jeff Lebby, not you. I'm going. I'm going to Starkville, right? I
That
mean,
would be a move, though, man. Starkville, leaving this Oklahoma team for that Mississippi
no, I
State team right
know,
now.
but he could be. I mean, not that he couldn't be a big deal as the next big thing at OU, right? We know
Mm-hmm.
what's in store for the quarterback that leads the Sooners to the promised land. But you talk about a situation made for giving the kid, the keys to the kingdom. Mississippi State, God knows they need help on offense. I mean, that's assuming why Zach Selman hired this guy. He needed someone to shake up the scoreboard at that stadium, not Art Briles and all that other baggage being being what it is. It's like an administrator told me, Eli, on the field at the end of the game on Friday, the TCU game, when I asked him how a Zach Selman phone call to Joe Castiglione might be received based on their relationship, and it's tight, based on how pissed off Joe was about what Lebby did over the Briles fiasco in September. And the administrator said, "Look at that scoreboard. That's 69 on the board for the Sooners, 62 offensive points." So I get it. This is big boy, you know, 2 legs at a time, put on your pants, college football. So that's why they hired Lebby. And I got to think that Lebby will at least ask the young guy, "Want to come with me?" I mean, he'd be as crazy not to ask that as Venables would be as crazy to ignore the young man in terms of what he does next with that job. So
Well, that's for sure, and clearly offense is one out. That's what people are excited about in Starkville, and you look at all the numbers. Sooners are top 10 in just about every category. So there is that at least that factor.
yeah,
Maybe people
yeah,
will look at it and say next year, well, situationally, 3rd and 3, I like what we're doing better, but the bar has been set at least on the numbers and some of those outputs in days like Friday, where the Sooners they put up 73 against Arkansas State. They dropped a boatload on Tulsa. I mean, they've piled on some, easier opponents, West Virginia, TCU. But fact is, putting up points, that's what got Jeff Lebby to Starkville.
yeah.
It's what the next guy's going to do. Before we get out of here, I want to ask you this kind of home run, pie in the sky, just having fun with it coordinator picks. I included Cliff Kingsbury and Scott Frost in my story.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to dream up some ridiculous, fanciful hire for Brent Venables for this spot, who would it be?
Just one guy. He just lost his job earlier this morning at Houston.
Whoa.
I would love to cover a team with Venables essentially running the defense and Dana Holgerson running the offense. Sports writers root for the story, right? We root for the story. I mean, let's be selfish for just a second. Let's dream up how wild it would be in terms of content at selloutcrowd.com if Venables could talk Holgerson into not reporting to the Nick Saban coach's rehabilitation clinic for a year in Tuscaloosa and instead taking the next one way on Southwest Airlines to Oklahoma City to sign a contract to be the play caller next year. With or without Gabriel and Arnold, it would be just an absolute acid trip to have Holgerson and Norman, I think.
Do I smell a column and some advocacy for Dana Holgerson up ahead?
Yeah, that could happen. I tell you what, if this drags on, if he doesn't hire Luttrell,
Yeah,
if
there you
Venables
go.
doesn't hire Seth Luttrell in the next 48 hours, that column's coming. I will on the record for you and the listeners.
Well, I'd be thrilled to read that. We're going to have a whole lot, right? On all
Yeah.
of this, everything else that is there to come, what they've got to do, who they might target. Is it Seth Luttrell? Is it somebody else? We'll have all that at selloutcrowd.com. We will have a Letterman Jacket podcast, I know, tomorrow. I'll be writing a bunch. So we've got a lot going on at Sellout Crowd. We'll have a lot more on this situation as the Sooners head into bowl season. Please follow along with all of us as we get that content out.